Ahoy and welcome to the Salty Dog, a special segment of the Catholic Men's Podcast, where we tell many a yarn for youngsters. Grab your grog, and we can begin. Fritt-Flacc by Jules Verne. A note from the narrator. This is all set in a fictional town and a fictional country. Fretzers are their currency. It's a very strange story, but it definitely teaches the listener to treat every neighbor as themselves. So let's get into it. Listen. Hear that? It's the wind let loose. It's the rain falling in torrents. This shrieking squall bends down the trees of the Valsinian coast and hurries on, flinging itself against the sides of the mountains of Krima. Along the whole length of the coast are high rocks, gnawed by the billows of the vast sea of Megalocrida. Awful, awful weather. Down by the harbor nestles the little town of Luktrop, perhaps 100 houses with green palings which defend them indifferently from the wild wind. 4 or 5 hilly streets, ravines rather than streets, paved with pebbles and strewn with ashes thrown from the active cones in the background. The volcano is not far distant. It's called the Vaglor. During the day it sends forth sulphurous vapors. At night, from time to time, great outpourings of flame. Like a lighthouse carrying 150 miles, the Vaglor indicates the port of Luktrop to the coasters, Feltsons, Verliches, and Balances, whose keels furrow the waters of Megalocrida. On the other side of the town are ruins dating from the Cimmerian era, then a suburb, Arab in appearance, much like a kasbah, with white walls, domed roofs, and sun-scorched terraces, which are all nothing but accumulations of square stones thrown together at random. Veritable dice are these, whose numbers will never be effaced by the rust of time. Among others, we notice the 6-4, a name given to a curious building, having 6 openings on one side and 4 on the other. A belfry overlooks the town, the square belfry of St. Philoflena, with bells hung in the thickness of the walls, which sometimes a hurricane will set in motion. That's a bad sign. The people tremble when they hear it. Such is Luktrop. Then come the scattered habitations in the country, set amid heath and broom as in Brittany. But this is not Brittany. Is it in France? I do not know. Is it in Europe? I cannot tell. At all events, don't look for Luktrop on any map. A discreet knock is struck upon the narrow door of the 6-4 at the left corner of the Rue Messelguier. This is one of the most comfortable houses in Luktrop, if such a word is even known there, one of the richest, if gaining some millions of fretzers by hook or by crook constitutes riches. The rat-tat is answered by a savage bark, in which is much a lupine howl, as if a wolf should bark. Then a window is opened above the door of the 6-4, and an ill-tempered voice says, "Deuce take people who come bothering here!" A young girl, shivering in the rain, wrapped in a thin cloak, asks if Dr. Frritt-Flacc is at home. "He is, or he is not, according to circumstances." "I want him to come to my father who is dying." "Where is he dying?" "At Valcarnion, 4 miles from here." "And his name?" "Vort Cartif." "Vort Cardiff? The herring salter?" "Yes, and if Dr. Frritt-Flacc..." "Dr. Frritt-Flacc is not at home." And the window closed with a slam, while the swishes of the wind and the swashes of the rain mingle in a deafening uproar. A hard man, this Dr. Frritt-Flacc, with little compassion, and intending no one unless paid cash in advance. His old Herzog, a mongrel of bulldog and spaniel, would have had more feeling than he. This house, called the 6-4, admitted no poor, and opened only to the rich. Further, it had a regular tariff. So much for a typhoid fever, so much for a fit, and for other complaints which doctors invent by the dozen. Now, Vort Cartif, the herring salter, was a poor man, and of low degree. Why should Dr. Frritt-Flacc have taken any trouble? And on such a night? "Is it for nothing that I should have had to get up?" he murmured as he went back to bed. That alone is worth 10 Fritzers. Hardly 20 minutes had passed when the iron hammer was again struck on the door of the 6-4. Much against his inclination, the doctor left his bed and leaned out of his window. "Who's there?" he cried.
"I am the wife of Vort Cartif."
"The herring salter of Valcarnian?"
"Yes, and if you refuse to come, he will die."
"All right, you'll be a widow, then."
"Here are 20 Fritzers."
20 Fritzers for going to Valcarnian? 4 miles from here? No, thank you. Be off with you." And the window was closed again. 20 Fritzers? A grand fee. Risk a cold or lumbago for 20 Fritzers, especially when tomorrow one has to go to Kiltreno to visit the rich Edzengoff, laid up with gout, which is valued at 50 Fritzers. With this agreeable prospect before him, Dr. Triflegus slept more soundly than before. To the noises of this squall were now added 3 blows of the knocker, struck by a more decided hand. The doctor slept. Then he woke, but in a fearful humor. When he opened the window, the storm came in like a charge of shot.
"I am come about the herring salter."
"That wretched herring salter again?"
"I am his mother."
"May his mother, his wife, and his daughter perish with him."
"He has had an attack. Some money has been paid us," continued the old woman. "An installment on the house sold to the Commandeur d'Utrap of the Rue Messelguier. If you do not come, my granddaughter will no longer have a father, my daughter-in-law a husband, myself a son." It was piteous and terrible to hear the old woman's voice, to know that the wind was freezing the blood in her veins, that the rain was soaking her very bones beneath her thin flesh.
"A fete? Why, that would be 200 Fritzers," replied the heartless Treffelgas.
"We have only 120.
"Good night," said the angry little man, and the window was again closed. But after due reflection, it appeared that 120 Fritzers for an hour and a half on the road, plus half an hour of visit, made a Fretzer a minute. A small profit, but still not to be despised. Instead of going to bed again, the doctor slipped into his coat, went down in his wading boots, with his hat on his head and his mufflers on his hands. He left his lamp lighted close to his medicine book, open at page 197. Then, pulling the door of the 6-4, he paused on the threshold. The old woman was there, leaning on her stick, bowed down by her 80 years of misery. "The 120 Fritzers?"
"Here is the money, and may God multiply it for you 100-fold.
"God? Whoever saw the color of his money?" The doctor whistled for Hertzhoff, his dog, gave him a small lantern to carry in his mouth, and took the road towards the sea. The old woman followed. What terrible, terrible weather! The bells of St. Philflina are all swinging by reason of the gale, a bad sign. But Dr. Triflegus is not superstitious. He believes in nothing, not even in his own science, except for what it brings him in. What weather! And also what a road! Pebbles and ashes, the pebbles slippery with seaweed, the ashes crackling with iron refuse. No other light than that from Hertzhoff's lantern, vague and uncertain. At times jets of flame from Vaglor uprear themselves, and in the midst of them appear great comical silhouettes. In truth, no one knows what is in the depths of those unfathomable craters. Perhaps spirits of the other world, which volatilize themselves as they come forth. The doctor and the old woman follow the curves of the little bays of the coast. The sea is white, with livid whiteness, a morning white. It sparkles as it throws off the crests of the surf, which seem like outpourings of glowworms. These two persons go on thus as far as the turn in the road between sandhills, where the brooms and the reeds clash together with a shock like that of bayonets. The dog had drawn near to his master, and seemed to say for him, "Come, come, 120 Fritzers for the strong box. That's the way to make a fortune. Another vine added to the vineyard, another dish added to our supper, another meat pie for the faithful Hertzhoff. Let us look after the rich invalids, and look after them according to their purses." At that spot the old woman pauses. With her trembling finger she points out among the shadows a reddish light. There is the house of Vort Cartif, the herring salter. "There?" said the doctor. "Yes," said the old woman. "Hurrah!" cries the dog Hertzhoff. A sudden explosion from the Vaglor, shaken to its very base. A sheaf of lurid flame springs up to the zenith, forcing its way through the clouds. Dr. Triflegus is hurled to the ground. He swears roundly, picks himself up, and looks about him. The old woman is no longer there. Has she disappeared through some fissure of the earth, or has she flown away on the wings of the mist? As for the dog, he's there still, standing on his hind legs, his jaws apart, his lantern extinguished. "Nevertheless, we will go on," mutters Dr. Triflegus. The honest man has been paid his 120 fretzers, and he must earn them. Only a luminous speck at the distance of half a mile. It's the lamp of the dying, perhaps the dead. Of course, it's the herring salter's house. The old woman pointed to it with her finger. No mistakes possible. Through the whistling swishes and the dashing swashes, through the uproar of the tempest, Dr. Triflegus tramps on with hurried steps. As he advances, the house becomes more distinct, being isolated in the midst of the landscape. It's very remarkable how much it resembles that of Dr. Triflegus, the 6'4" of Leuctrop. The same arrangement of windows, the same little arched door. Dr. Triflegus hastens on as fast as the gale allows him. The door is ajar. He has but to push it. He pushes it. He enters, and the wind roughly closes it behind him. The dog Hertzhoff, left outside, howls with intervals of silence. Strange. One would have said that Dr. Triflegus had come back to his own house. And yet he's not wandered. He's not even taken a turning. He's at Valcarnian, not at Leuctrop. And yet here's the same low vaulted passage, the same wooden staircase with high banisters, worn away by the constant rubbing of hands. Many houses have worn-away banisters. He ascends. He reaches the landing. Beneath the door a faint light filters through, as in 6'4". Is it a delusion? In the dimness he recognizes his room, the yellow sofa. On the right the old chest of pearwood. On the left the brass-bound strong-box in which he intended to deposit his 120 fretzers. There's his armchair with the leathern cushions. There's his table with its twisted legs, and on it, close to the expiring lamp, his medical book open at page 197. "What's the matter with me?" he murmurs. What is the matter with him? Fear? Every hair stands on end. But hasten, for want of oil the lamp expires, and also the dying man. Yes, there's the bed. His own bed, with posts and canopy as wide as it is long, shut in by heavy curtains. Is it possible that this is the pallet of a wretched herring salter? With a quaking hand, Dr. Triflegus seizes the curtains. He opens them. Ah, what a cry, to which outside responds an unearthly howl from the dog. The dying man is not the herring salter, Vort Cartiff. It's Dr. Triflegus. It is he whom congestion has attacked. He himself. Cerebral apoplexy with sudden accumulation of serosity on the cavities of the brain, with paralysis of the body on the side opposite that of the seat of the lesion. Yes, it is he who was sent for, and for whom 120 fretzers have been paid. He who, from hardness of heart, refused to attend the dying herring salter. Dr. Triflegus is like a madman. He knows himself lost. At each moment the symptoms increase. Not only all the functions of the organs slacken, but the lungs and the heart cease to act, and yet he has not quite lost consciousness. What can be done? He rubs his chest violently. His own breathing grows slower. He warms his feet with hot bricks. His own grow cold. Then his double lifts himself, falls back, and draws one last breath. Dr. Triflegus, notwithstanding all that his science has taught him to do, dies beneath his own hands. In the morning a corpse was found in the house of the 6'4", that of Dr. Triflegus. They put him in a coffin and carried him with much pomp to the cemetery of Leuctrop, whither he had sent so many others in a professional manner. As to the old dog Hertzhoff, it's said that to this day he haunts the country with his lantern alight and howling like a lost dog. I don't know if that be true, but strange things happen in Volsenia, especially in the neighborhood of Leuctrop. And again, I warn you not to hunt for that town on the map. The best geographers have not yet agreed as to its latitude, not even to its longitude. Thanks for listening all. I wish you fair winds and following seas. Godspeed.